go. All right, we'll get started once we get 10 or so people on here. So. All right, welcome everybody to Facebook Live. It is week 1 of Missouri District Football. Tonight, Monroe City will host 0-9 Missouri Military Academy. And again, I want to thank CW's for being the sponsor of Facebook Live. Go there for all your Monroe City apparel. I know they had the conference championship shirts that are out or close to being out. So just please... go there, get your apparel. Let's talk about the Palmyra game to start off Facebook Live. Just a great atmosphere. Without a doubt, the loudest crowd we had broadcast for throughout the year. And, Monroe City faced a little bit of adversity offensively after 3 weeks of the Keenan Batzel show. Palmyra did a pretty good job of bottling him down, about 50 yards below his season average. Gets 90 yards, had a nice 30-yard run and a 10-yard run on a second-half drive. But for the most part, Palmyra was able to keep him bottled up. A lot of five-man fronts and, stunts up the middle kept him contained. But big games from Osborne, Aaron Plum. And, defense, a lot of bend, don't break. In the first half, they led a couple, second half, they didn't play their best, especially third and fourth down, a lot of conversions from Palmyra. But big play by Lance Williams late in the game seals the deal, and Monroe's able to come out with a win over the rival 26-21.
One of the things that stood out to me, first off, kudos to Palmyra. I think coming into a hostile environment, that field is just fun to play at. It's a neat setup, and they came out and showed what they're made of. I talked to a couple folks in Palmyra this week, and the growth of Limby, their quarterback, everybody's been really impressed. In fact, a lot of folks are saying he quite possibly could be better than Krager. The more experience he gets, he's definitely got a better arm and seems to be more comfortable in the pocket. Palmyra, key to their success was 3 big fourth down conversions. A couple of them resulted in a touchdown. But it seems like as the stage gets bigger and as the games get tighter, there's Monroe seems to stand up and face that adversity and make big play after big play, especially coming from Zach Osborne. Every chance, tight game, he just comes up big. Him and Blake Hayes, for that matter, both those guys have been in some crazy games. And I think one thing that stood out to me is just thinking about kind of the legacy of this senior class. Man, they've been in some serious battles this year with Elias, big game now in Palmyra. But just over the last 3 years, you think of some of the games that they've played to get to state championship, to play in the state championship, and now this year with 2 games that came down to really one final drive and being able to seal it with an interception by Lance. So great victory, great win, and we may get a chance to see those guys one more time before the year's over.
And Ryan mentioned multiple times in the radio broadcast last week that he thinks that there's going to be a rematch there. I'm not so sure. I think Clark and Palmyra, that's going to be a great game next week. And later on in this Facebook Live, we're going to go through a full look at the brackets for Class 2, State of Missouri, kind of have a little bit of, our version of bracketology, I guess, kind of, letting you know what the bracket looks like, maybe some matchups we see, some routes for certain teams to make a run. So we'll get to that later.
Luke, what's up? Shout out to Jinju, South Korea.
Okay,
Hope you're having a good visit there, buddy.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get into that bracket. But first, I wanted to give the Mayor of Huntington Class 2 rankings, which you can listen to these, and it may help you kind of decipher some of the teams in the 64-team bracket that we're going to get ready to go through. But Brad has Lutheran North as his new number 1 team. They're 6-3. They are up 1 spot as looks like Missouri Military Academy is making their way to the field.
13 players.
13 players dressed out for Missouri Military Academy right now.
Sorry to hear that, Luke.
So anyway, Luther North number 1, number 2 Blair Oaks 9-0. They're up 1 spot in Brad's rankings. Number 3 Lamar down 2 after losing by a field goal to Cassville last week. Cassville ranked in Class 3. Went down to the wire. Cassville last minute field goal to win that game. Number 4 through 8 are the same as last week. You have Lathrop at 9-0. Number 4 Monroe City at 8-1. Number 5. Number 6 Lawson at 8-1. Number 7 Ava at 8-1. Number 8 Lexington 8-1. Number 9 up 1 spot Clark County at 7-2. And number 10 Macon at 7-2. They weren't ranked last week. So let's just kind of go through the brackets. How Missouri sets up their Class 2 brackets. They have districts 1 through 8, but you play the district next to you, but then they kind of jump around. Like, for example, one side of the bracket is districts 1 and 2 and districts 5 and 6. We are in district 6 of Class 2, and then the other side would be 3, 4, and then 7 and 8. So district 1 for Class 2 has the number 1 seed being Charleston, and this is mainly out of southeast Missouri. They will play East Prairie. East Prairie, a team Monroe City may be familiar, a team they played in a state semifinal in 1994, and they won that game 37-0. Also the home of David Kirby, our head coach. So Charleston 8-1. East Prairie 3-6. Charleston won that game 49-20 earlier in the year. I think it's pretty safe to say they will move on. The 4-5 game is kind of an interesting game. It's St. Pius X out of Festus, Missouri, and Kelly 7-2. St. Pius, Kelly 6-3, and then the bottom side of that bracket, Jefferson at 8-1 will play Malden at 2-7, and Caruthersville at 6-2 will play New Madrid County Central at 4-5. I was kind of doing a little looking. I think Charleston is one of the most vulnerable 1 seeds that we're going to go through. I think that Caruthersville team down at the bottom of the bracket is going to be pretty tough. They're coached by Jimmy Jackson, who was a running back at Missouri years ago, and they've been playing a lot of good ball. And I think Jefferson at 8-1 is going to be tough, and that St. Pius team out of St. Louis. I think there's 4 teams that could come out of that bracket.
We're getting ready to go through the Luther North bracket, but that bracket will end up facing Luther North's bracket, which is the 1 seed in their district. And they're going to have a tough draw in the quarterfinals heading into the semis. So,
all right. So District 2 is again Luther North's bracket. Number 1 in Brad's poll. I believe they were number 2 in the state poll this week. They are 6-3, and they'll play a 0-9 Grandview team. And Luther North, quite frankly, did not play very many Class 2 teams. They went out of state. They played upper class, and I think they are going to be...
It's odd. Luther North might have the weakest district at any of them in the state, and they're probably the toughest team right now in the state. So
yeah, I'd agree with that. So they are 6-3. Grandview 0-9 is their first opponent. And then, interestingly enough, the 4-5 game in that bracket is a 0-9 Carnahan team and a 1-8 Duchesne team. Now, Carnahan has a little bit of familiarity because Carnahan was a team that West Hancock played in week 2, and West Hancock, beat them by 30 or 40 points. So, not a great team, but they may have a chance to get to the second round and then run into Luther North. So, on the bottom side of the bracket, the only team that may give Luther North any kind of run is Live for Life Academy out of St. Louis. They're 8-1. They lost to, I believe, St. Charles Lutheran maybe. They lost the first game of the season. They've won 8 in a row. Again, I think Luther North would be a considerable favorite in that game, but that is the only team that may give them a run. They play a 2-7 Cuba team, and then on the bottom is a couple St. Louis suburb schools, Principia and Herculaneum. Principia, I believe, is 5-4. Herculaneum is 3-6, and we'll kind of see how that district goes. But it looks like it's going to be Luther North against Lift for Life, and Luther North's going to be a huge favorite in that game. So the District 5 which would be who our district plays afterwards, is Blair Oaks District. Blair Oaks is again a heavy favorite in this district. They will play. Sorry, Ross Robertson, who's watched a few times, our buddy from California. Blair Oaks will play California. Blair Oaks 9-0, California 0-9, and they played, I believe, last week, and Blair Oaks won that game 64-7. So
that's another district that's
fairly weak.
Yeah, fairly weak. Pretty obvious who's going to come out of that. And I know you're heading into our district, but essentially, looking at our side of the bracket, it kind of comes down to maybe 4 or 5 teams between Blair Oaks, Lutheran North, and then you got Monroe, Clark, and Palmyra coming out of this district. So clearly our district is, as Dewar put it, the district of death, and it's got 3 of the top 5 teams on this side of the bracket playing in it.
And I was going to get to that too. And I think, realistically, if you look at the districts, which we'll go through some more, we got time. Quite frankly, guys, we're going to talk about some non-stuff that isn't necessarily about this game because, there's just not a whole lot of ways we can pump this game up. It's going to be a one-sided affair. So we're trying to get, some other topics that may be of interest. So. But what I was getting at is the other district of death that we'll get to would be Lawson, Lathrop, Macon. That district on the other side that Macon went to on the west side of the state is going to be pretty tough as well. But the rest of the Blair Oaks district, Father Tolton is at 3. Father Tolton and Herman will be the 4-5 game. They're both 3-6. Father Tolton played a pretty tough schedule. I'd assume that they're going to get out of that game. South Callaway in Hallsville, the 2-7 game. South Callaway 8-1. Not the most difficult schedule, and quite frankly, Hallsville. There's been some chatter on some message boards that Hallsville may be the better team in this game. Hallsville's 3-6, so we'll see. And then the 4-5 game or the 3-6 game is a rematch of an emo contest between North Callaway and Montgomery County. North Callaway 6-3, Montgomery County 5-4. Montgomery County won that game earlier in the year, 40-34. So that's District 5. District 6. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with our district. Monroe City 8-1. We'll play again Missouri Military Academy 0-9. Pretty clearly, we'll go ahead and say Monroe City's going to win this game. Probably not what Coach Kirby's saying, but I'm saying it. Bowling Green, we will play the winner of Bowling Green and Clopton-Ellsbury. Bowling Green 6-3, Clopton-Ellsbury 3-6. Bowling Green won that game 41-6 earlier in the year. Bowling Green has played a couple conference teams. They played South Shelby in a game where South Shelby went up 28-14 and just kind of wore out. And Bowling Green came back and won that game 42-24. And then they played Palmyra, and Palmyra put it on pretty good, 37-0 or so. So that will be what we await in round 2 of district play. And then the bottom side of the bracket, you have Clark and Highland. Clark 7-2, Highland 1-8. Clark won that game 40-12 earlier in the year. And then you have Palmyra at 6-3 against the 2-7 Fanfare Ball Club. So that's one side of the bracket. Like Jeremy was saying. What's up, Nick? I think it's pretty clear that there are 5 teams that have separated themselves from everyone else on this side of the bracket, and it's Blair Oaks, it's Lutheran North, and then it's our 3 teams: Monroe City, Clark, and Palmyra. I think all 5 of those teams would be heavy favorite against every single other team in any district on this side of the state. So
I think it's also fair to say that the team that comes out of this district is a pretty tough draw to make it all the way to the state finals, most likely facing Blair Oaks in the quarterfinals. So you're going to have to take on a team that's really been top 1, top 2, and as you said multiple times, folks down at Wardsville, I said that's been one of the best teams that they've had, and then following the winner of that will most likely hit Lutheran North in the semifinals, and then quite frankly, you're probably heading for a collision course with Lamar on the other side of the bracket. Lamar's, being real, looking at that side of the bracket, they really don't have quite the journey that some of the even Blair Oaks and Lutheran North will have to take to get to the finals.
Yeah, Lamar, it would be probably the biggest. If Lutheran North and Lamar, if one of those 2 teams is not in the state semifinals, that is a huge shock because they don't have the most difficult roads in their side of the bracket. So the other side of the bracket, you have Brad's number 7 team, 8-1 Ava, playing a 0-9 Forsyth team. The 4-5, this is District 3. 4-5 matchup is Liberty and Mountain Grove. Liberty 6-3, Mountain Grove 5-4. Liberty won a game earlier in the year, so I'd say you got Ava and Liberty facing off later in that district. On the bottom side, you have a couple 8-1 teams: 8-1 Fairgrove versus a 1-8 Willow Springs, and 8-1 Stratford versus a 5-4 Houston. I think any one of those three teams, probably Liberty could be included there. I've seen some of their schedule. One of those, I think. You could probably draw out a hat. All four of those teams have a chance to make it out of that district. It's just unfortunate they're going to have to run into Lamar, and they're going to be heavy underdogs against Lamar. So the
wrong side of that one, most likely.
Yeah, District 4 is Lamar 8-1. They play Stockton, who's 2-7, and then you have the 4-5 game is Sarcoxy versus Butler. Sarcoxy 6-3, Butler 2-7. I think it's pretty safe to say Lamar won't have any trouble with any of those teams. And then on the bottom side, you have El Dorado Springs and Warsaw. El Dorado Springs 7-2. Warsaw, again, a team that we played in '94 for the state championship. They're 2-7. And then on the bottom side, you have Versailles and 0-9 East Newton team. East Newton actually was the 4th-ranked team in the state our senior year, so they had some success. I think. I would bet that El Dorado Springs probably plays Lamar in that district championship, but it won't be close. Lamar's going to win that one. So the bottom side is a little bit more interesting for our area. You have District 7, not so much. You have Summit Christian and St. Paul Lutheran. Those are both Kansas City area schools. Summit Lutheran is the number 1 seed in that district. They're 7-2. St. Paul Lutheran 2-7. Then you have a Knob Noster and University also out of Kansas City. Knob Noster 6-3, University 4-5. I think Knob Noster they'll be competitive against Summit too. The bottom side, you have Holden and Lone Jack, and then you have Lafayette County, who made it to the state championship last year. They're the 3 seed in that district, and
Lafayette County knocked off Clark County in the semifinals last year, but. Again, both Clark and Lafayette were playing for 3rd place, basically. Luther North and Lamar was the state championship game in the semifinals last year in Class 2.
Yep. And then the final bracket, or the final district we'll go through, which would be District of Death. Number 2, you have number 1 seed Lathrop, number 4 in the state, 9-0. They will play a Richmond team that's just not very good, so that won't be much of a match. But maybe the most interesting second round matchup is going to be in this district next week. Macon shouldn't have any problem with Trenton. And Macon against Lathrop, I was talking to somebody today, and it's a little bit like Brookfield used to be for Monroe City. Brookfield almost every year would be 9 or 10-0 back when they played 10-game regular seasons coming out of districts. And Monroe City would come up, and a lot of times it just wasn't very competitive. Just Brookfield did not have much of a schedule, which is why them and Clark County joined the CCC. We'll see if Lathrop is going to be like that. You have Lathrop, Lawson, and Lexington, all that have not played great schedules. Lexington actually played Brookfield and then put it on Brookfield pretty good, but those other 3 teams, it's going to be a 4-team matchup. I think it'd be interesting to see Lawson against Brookfield, whether Brookfield can play a little defense and give Lawson a scare. I don't think they have the offense to play with Lawson, but a little bit of a preview to see how the CCC would match up against some of those Western teams.
Yeah,
so,
I got Macon coming out of that, and I think it would be awesome for them to go down and put the hurting on Lathrop, Lexington, those teams that have been really around the top 10, if not in the top 10 the entire year, and Macon, of course, playing in arguably the strongest conference in the state, the Clarence Canyon Conference. It'd be neat to see them come out of there. They would most likely, again, they'd run into all roads lead to Lamar. They would see Lamar, if they came out of the quarters, they would see Lamar in the semifinals if Macon was able to get out of that district, win the quarterfinals, and then they'd run into Lamar in the semifinals. So.
Yeah, I think, looking at those brackets, I think, Lamar is definitely going to win their side of the bracket. I think they are heavy favorites to make it to the state championship. I will say that I think that the team that comes out of Macon's district will be, at least able to put a scare in Lamar. I think Lamar will be a big favorite. But that's our predictions. If y'all have any thoughts, we may, as we get closer. Again, this is, like the NCAA tournament, we're starting at 64 today, and we're going to go cut in half every week. So we'll be to 32 next week, and maybe we'll go through again, kind of see where things will line up, because next week there's going to be a lot more interesting matchups, quite frankly, than what we had this week. There's a couple 4 and 5 matchups that are fairly interesting, but just not around here. So that's kind of where we are.
I think next week for us locally, all eyes will be on Clark Palmyra.
Clark and Palmyra, and I think, again, I don't think we're going to see, even if we get to the state championship, not anybody will see, but I think a lot of CCC people will be interested in that Macon-Lathrop game, just to see how Lathrop, the high-ranking undefeated, matches up against the CCC battle-tested team. So that'll be interesting. What else we got? Again, just not a whole lot to talk about with the game tonight. Again, I tried to contact their coach, didn't get anything, so we're kind of coming in blind. We'll see kind of how things match up. But we did want to go through the Clarence Cannon Conference teams. Again, we got to see all these guys throughout the year calling the games. So the first team was the all-purpose player was Brock Wood out of South Shelby. The offensive player of the year, very deserving. Monroe City took off against us, and it finished the year with a couple 300-yard rushing games. Very impressive player, the senior. Much deserved. Nash Waller, the quarterback from Macon, is the first team quarterback. Again, deserved. I thought he had the best arm in the conference this year. Ran it really well against us. And then the receivers, you have Nick Wheaton and Jerem Alexander. Nick Wheaton from Centralia actually was probably the most effective offensive player. Nick Wheaton was the most effective guy for Centralia. They ran a lot of jet sweeps with him. He was pretty successful. Jerem Alexander, you could probably put him at running back or whatever.
Centralia, just for a heads up, Centralia Class 3 playing Mexico tonight. That'll be interesting. They'll run into Moberly most likely the next round as well.
Yep. And then you have Kendrick Waddell from Macon, who had a touchdown or two against us week 4. Running backs, Zach Osborne, Keenan Batzel, Kevin Edwards. Zach, it was a unanimous selection, first team, and then Zach, 900-something yards. If he gets any kind of run, he'll be a 1,000-yard rusher after tonight. Keenan over 1,300 yards. Kevin Edwards, we saw how good he was, 120 or 130 yards against us. And then the offensive line, Jonathan Saxberry, Jackson Powell from Palmyra, Caden Phillips from Macon, Kyle Goldbrick from Clark County, and Brooks Baker from Brookfield, all deserving. Saxberry, Powell, and Phillips all unanimous. I thought Saxberry and Phillips were the best 2 linemen that I saw this year. Phillips just a monster, 6'7".
He is a big guy. And not only big, but he can move too. I was most impressed. Aside from Jonathan here locally, I was most impressed with him from a lineman perspective. Which, by the way, for those who weren't at that game, picture Jonathan Saxberry except about 7 inches taller.
Yeah.
Just a monster of an individual. He'll definitely be playing ball Saturday somewhere.
Yep. So on the defense, you have Nick Wheaton again, Blake Class, who was a pretty good junior defensive back from Macon, Lance Williams from Monroe City. London Bruck from Clark County, again, all deserving. I think, we probably, we'll skim through the second team. I think Kalen Kendrick O'Brien certainly was a first team deserving. Blake Hayes probably too. I think all 3 of our defensive backs could have very easily been first team. Defensive line, Jonathan Saxberry, Brooks Baker, Caden Phillips, and then they have offensive linemen, defensive ends of Max Hayes, Christensen from Macon, and Spencer Gregory from Clark County. I'd tell you right now, if you give me Saxbury, Baker, Phillips, and Max Hayes, I don't even care what my back seven looks like.
No.
That team is going to win a lot of games.
Yes.
Those are 4 of the better defensive linemen we've had in this area in a long time.
And Spencer Gregory, while not the same size as those guys, we saw him. He's a running back for Clark County, an absolute bull of a running back. He'll run right through you. So strong defensive end and strong runner from Spencer Gregory. He wouldn't be a bad one to have on that team as well.
Right. And then inside linebackers, you have Gus Stidham, Brady Barnett, and Cason Wilt. All 3 good players. Special teams were Elijah Mead, punter, Luke from Highland, Luke Hunter from Centralia, the kicker, and Brock Wood, return specialist. Players of the year, Brock Wood. Offensively, Jonathan Saxbury. Defensively, Pete Class as the coach.
Rockwood, just a speedster, and South Shelby tonight runs into Knox County. They'll most likely face Scotland County in the second round. That district will end up playing West Trent, I believe. But I got to tell you, the team that comes out of that district, I was looking at Class 1A, pretty solid chance of making it clear to the title game. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see West Trent playing a Class 1 title game this year.
You know, in South Shelby and Scotland County, all capable coming out of that district.
Absolutely.
And really it's going to be that district, Marceline and Fayette, and whoever wins out of that group is probably going to state. Now, at state, they're going to run into a Hayti team that is really, really good, led by a running back that's already committed to the University of Indiana. So I would say they're heavy favorite in Class 1.
You know what? Hold on here, Michael. I think they may run into Hayti in the semifinals.
Okay.
I apologize. I got my back mixed up. So they'll run into Hayti in the semifinals and have to get through them to get to this title game.
So I'd say Final Four probably more likely there. We don't kind of run low on time. We won't get through the whole second team. You can find it. Central Mo Info has it. I'm sure you can find it anywhere. But I do want to touch base on the Monroe City guys that got second team. Blake Hayes is all-purpose. A great career, capped off by another all-conference nod for Blake. Congratulations to him and all the first-teamers. Jaden Underhill, another senior that's deserving to be on the second team there as an offensive lineman.
It's one of those years, and we've seen him several times, there's so much talent on this team. A lot of them are well-deserving, but unfortunately you reward those top talent, and it's not the norm by any means to have an individual like Saxbury go first-team all-conference offense, first-team all-conference defense, and then defensive player of the year. We're trying to think back. Keith Painter is the last one I can think of that had those same awards, and he was an absolute beast for a down lineman, defensive player of the year at the D tackle, similar to Saxbury. So, congratulations, Saxbury, on an outstanding career, and again, individual that'll be remembered for a long time, playing I think all state since he was a sophomore. Also impressive figure for him as well.
Right, and then on the defense, you have Kalen Kendrick O'Brien. I mentioned him; he's second team. Certainly could have been a first team player. Damian Holland as well, another guy that is a first team type talent that just tough. CCC is tough to get all conference, so he's second team. And then Hunter Lilly, honorable mention, and Blake Hayes, the second team return guy. A lot of that probably just based on the success he's had in his career as a return guy. So that's the all conference. I know Brad Williams is going to him and Matt Seward were coming up with a 32-team bracket, so some of you may want to contact them. But that's it for us. Again, thank you all for watching. We will be posting this later, and then join us tonight, 6:40 pregame, 7 o'clock kickoff. We may have a lot of interesting things to talk about. We'll see.
I think we're going to have time, so if you guys have topics, feel free to comment on Facebook Live.
Comment
after.
Jeremy will be checking it. If you have Jeremy's number, send him a message. We will be open for a lot of discussion, I would imagine. So
I will say one thing. It's going to be easy for Mike and I to get the numbers right. 13 players from Mexico. I think we can handle that tonight. So,
all right. Thank you all.